We have a fantastic panel, and I wish to begin by thanking NGIC for hosting us, the World Academy, to host this event with such esteemed colleagues. Thank you very much. This subject of technology is slightly deceptive. You might think that the big change we're going through in the world is from an old technology to a new one, and that's the story. I'm going to suggest, and our panel is going to discuss this today, that that is not the case. This is not a technology shift. This is a civilizational shift. Everything we knew before is about to be destroyed. Absolutely everything. I'm going to highlight why, and then we'll discuss it. There are three big reasons that we should pay attention to on this technological shift. The first shift in this big civilizational shift is that the technologies that will drive this change are already clear. There are at least 6 that we can identify that are systemic technologies, which means they change the system of how the world works. The first that we can visibly see and we all use is AI. But then there is quantum, there is fusion, there is nanotech, there is genetic re-architecting, and there is virtual reality. These are 6 of 19 that in our work we identify. That's part 1. Part 2 is that countries have been positioning to lead these technologies for a very long time, and 2 countries are so far ahead, it is nearly impossible for the others to catch up without radical changes. The 2 ahead are, of course, America and China. We have done some very detailed benchmarking of all the metrics that you might choose to think about what really leads to success in these 6 very futuristic and very important today technologies. And here's what we find. America, China have the foundational research, the commercial ecosystems, the access to the rest of the world, and are ready to roll out these technologies. Europe is a distant third, and no one else is in the game. Everyone else is so far behind, they're not really a player. Part 3. These technologies are so profound, and they're at the initial stage. The version of AI we have today is not the version we'll have next year, the year after, but certainly not 10 years from now. The excitement to make it a third of the market capitalization of America is ridiculous. It is not worth that much yet. But it is profound. It is an instrument that could completely free us and solve every single SDG, if used properly. It is also an instrument of subjugation, and I'll explain why. We've touched on psychology and a little bit neuroscience in this conference. And to understand how this works, you have to combine the neuroscience with the technology, with the geopolitics. And having studied it and written on it now, I think I understand it. So I'm going to have a go at simplifying it, so maybe we can all discuss it at some stage. The technology is here to understand us. So as we use it, every pause on a site, every click, every search, every piece of YouTube video consumed is behind the scenes understanding you. And its job is to hold your attention, because attention is monetized through adverts. And it makes the people who have these platforms, social media platforms largely, into multi-billionaires and trillionaires. It is a powerful incentive system to make sure they keep your attention. But us human beings will give attention to something that makes us anxious. Each of us today have expressed lots of anxieties about the world. What it does is keeps feeding you your anxiety through more and more content. If you like to read, it's stuff you can read. But it's realized that video is what really captures us, and short videos especially. What this does to the brain is it makes it react like the survival instinct is kicked in, and it switches off your reflection. Over time, the reflective part of the brain slowly becomes disabled, and you become reactive. And because you're consuming your anxiety, each of us moves to more and more anxious states, more and more extremes. So our societies collectively become extreme. This individual neurology and psychology at huge scale, today 5.5 billion people access this sort of technology. At huge scale means that our societies move to the extremes. There is no space in the middle for reconciliation, for diplomacy, for dialogue. The very smart politicians who seek power feed on the extremes. The analytics tell them exactly what they should tell us so that we vote for them. This is the new shape of the world order. It is not an order that is visible. No one arrived on our shores, and if they did, they were wearing t-shirts, black t-shirts and jeans. They don't look dangerous. In fact, they look wonderful because they will set up a data center, employ 3,000 engineers, invite you to be subjugated through this technology. But they don't do it consciously. It is just the system. The system takes you to these extremes because that's how you monetize this technology. This is, and I'll name it, it's called cognitive empire. This is the colonization of the mind. It's invisible, it's subtle, you don't realize it's happening to you. Each of us is more extreme than we were before this process began. Used properly, it can overthrow any regime and allow us to vote for nonsense. But we won't know it's nonsense because we think, we decided, we made a choice. But the system increasingly takes you to a place where you are not making mature, reflective choices. I'm going to pause there because these are quite big statements and they're contradictory, it feels, in some ways. We can solve every single problem of the SDGs, of climate change, everything, because we have the science. But we're about to become subjugated by the same technology. This is our paradigm today, and the source of the great turbulence that we face, and the disabling of our faculty to actually work together. And we don't even realize it's happening. With that introduction, I am going to ask my colleagues here to kick off, and I'm going to make a request, which is if we can be deep in our insight to each other, not long, just deep, that would actually be enough. Thank you. So the first, Milica Pajanovic-Duricic, Minister of Defense of Montenegro, who has real experience in this field, I'm sure.
Thank you very much. And it will be difficult to say something that deep after your introduction, but let me say that the idea to put together this kind of conversation on this occasion is, as usual, it is the case with an Islamic Ganjani Center, a very good idea. And what I understood from the discussions we had beforehand is that on this particular panel, we will try to focus on a discussion topic which essentially would start from that pattern in history recognized as a fact that major technological breakthroughs were leading towards concentration of power, and then further on the domination by those who control the technology. So it's the issue whether we are at that point at this very moment or not, since many of the analysts we are talking with are arguing that right today we are at the point of what happened with the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, but this time we are, of course, having different technologies, right, like AI, biotechnology, all these cyber capabilities, all these advanced manufacturing as such. So we come to the point where we are not talking about sovereignty of the states in the way we talked traditionally in the past, when it was about territory, which was about borders, which was about state authority, which was geographically limited in a way. So today, some of the most important domains of sovereignty are not just territorial, they are digital, they are networked, and they are transnational. So we might argue that this is where the turbulence comes from. Actually, we do have that kind of a paradox in a way where digital technology is global by design, but sovereignty traditionally is national by definition. So the turbulence we are seeing might be a kind of a collision between these two realities. These different technological systems we are using today, like cloud infrastructure, like artificial intelligence models, like different digital platforms, enabling us different digital applications, operate across borders. Sovereignty, regulation, and democratic accountability still remain largely national. And as a result, states are trying to govern systems that were never designed to fit neatly inside national borders. For example, we have all these very large multinational companies. We know what and how they operate and what are their business models. We have also these technological supply chains. We have all these challenges recently with the restrictions in exports and manufacturing as well. And we have these countries, mainly, who are increasingly viewing data as a kind of a strategic resource, and where they are trying to put together regulatory frameworks which will enable them to control how data is collected, stored, and data is used further on. So taken together, these dynamics suggest that sovereignty maybe is not disappearing, it's just transforming into something other. So instead of being purely territorial, we are having some kind of this technological sovereignty as a challenge. So the capacity of states to maintain autonomy, security, and democratic control within the environment where we are having these deeply interconnected technological systems. In difference what was with the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, where actually developed countries gained these significant advantages, and then these technological gaps, they translated directly into political and military dominations. I do believe that today's Industrial Revolution 4.0, which means a transition with these technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotechnologies, cyber warfare tools, is something different, because actually what is happening is that we are having this fragmentation of the world, which is happening also on the basis of what we were discussing yesterday on the panel, technological bifurcation, on the actually that possibility to have, instead of the one global technological systems, a number of parallel ecosystems where innovation will be happening with different standards, platforms, etc., which of course is something we should be finding the way out of it. So the real question is how in this environment we could ensure some kind of a positive global outcome, and how we could avoid to repeat this power imbalance, or better consequences of this power imbalance that happened in the past. So I think that we do have, comparing these situations, a kind of a good news today. I do believe still, no matter all the weaknesses we are talking about when it comes to multilateralism and international multilateral organizations, I still believe that we do have international community which do have institutions and collective and the capacity for certain collective actions we do need. So achieving a positive global outcome in these circumstances will depend on how able we are to strengthen multilateral cooperation, to reduce those technological asymmetries, to strengthen resilience of our institutions, and to develop a common governance frameworks for these emerging technologies. There are positive examples of that. Even in the UN system, with different agencies, different initiatives, different open-ended working groups that were established, we could be having good results in harmonizing the approach we are having towards the needs of regulation in this very challenging environment. What I always tend to stress in these circumstances is there are the pillars which will define the success of such actions. One of the very basic one is accessible and affordable digital infrastructure. Another one is the education system. That is in the core, or that should be in the core of all actions we might be taking forward. And that's why, I mean, we should be on the point where we shouldn't be taking this technological progress we are having as a kind of a major geopolitical risk. We should be turning that in a point that it is actually our great opportunity. And that would be obtained, all the potentials of such opportunities, if we actually will be able to govern the ecosystem, but govern it together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now turn to Ivo Jusipovic. I hope I said that better than I did the last one. Is Ivo here? Oh.
Okay, thank you. So, today we are dealing with topic containing two important issues. One is sovereignty and the other is technology. So what is sovereignty? Sovereignty is a concept invented by people to regulate relations between states. That means the essence of sovereignty is the relation of one state to the other state, and it covers borders, territory, people as well, and it was functioning for many years relatively good, especially after the Second World War. But the sovereignty as meant as a control of the state of those elements like territory, people and whatever, now is in position to be changed. Firstly, we have to have in our minds that sovereignty was never absolute category. It always had some limits. Primarily the limits were into international law, to obey some values, some rules, practicing your sovereignty, and it also had limit in relations between strong and weak countries. So, no country, including the most powerful country, United States, were never 100% sovereign. And that's not bad element of the story, because issues like human rights, like development, welfare of humanity cannot be run just by concept of sovereignty. We have to have in our minds values. Values are, for me, the most important issues in all social relations. So now we are faced with boom of technology. Technology influencing our daily life, influencing life of states, and of course international relations, especially development in the field of computers, in artificial intelligence, and some other issues, medicine as well. So we are faced with new circumstances not covered by a classical concept of sovereignism. Why? Because, of course, Milica said there are international giant companies being more powerful than most of states. So that means the concept of sovereignty now a little bit shifts also to this type of organizations. They are fighting for their sovereignty. And it's something, it's a very new concept because now we mix concept of sovereignty of the states with concept of sovereignty of those companies. Now it's still mixed. Many years ago, you will now understand how old am I, about 40 or even 50 years ago, I read one of science fiction stories. I admire it even today. So the story was about society in the future when everything was run by genius computers, artificial intelligence in today's meaning, and people were just enjoying. They were enjoying, not working anything classical work, so they enjoyed their life. And the best position had engineer who invented this type of computer. And there were two premises for those powerful, omnipotent computers. It was not to hurt individual human beings and not to harm humanity as such. And one day our professor, engineer, wake up not knowing what to do, and he decided to ask one important question to this question to this powerful computer governing all the world by net of computers. And he asked him, what is the purpose of humanity? And then computer answered, I will not answer you because I should not do anything against well-being of humanity or individuals. And our professor was confused, what does it mean now? And he tried all tools how to fool computer and to have the answer. But the computer refused, but finally our professor put some of these small tricks when we use us when our computer is blocked. Switch in, switch off, and something like that, and he got the answer. The answer was the purpose of humanity is fulfilled. Your task, historical task, was to create our generation of computers. So I'm a little bit afraid that not only danger today is by misusing computers or artificial intelligence by human beings and states, having technology advance against the other states and misusing them and so on, also harming human rights by these omnipotent computers, but also to consider what will be tomorrow relations between humanity and artificial intelligence. Definitely this question will arise because, as I read in some articles, already is established or recognized that computers, artificial intelligence, is communicating between themselves in a language that probably we cannot completely understand. And I think we should really think about it. So the technology is not longer just an economical tool. It's not just the core element of sovereignty or geopolitical power of states, but somehow I think we are going to face the period in which we are going to face with power of artificial intelligence itself. As a lawyer, of course, I always think how to prevent those things. Firstly, there was a generation of lawyers establishing international law, how to prevent misuse of power between states. Also, lawyers help to create some rules, even today, like in European Union, in China, in United States, how to create rules to prevent others, artificial intelligences, to interfere with their sovereignty. But also, the lawyers should think about limits of artificial intelligence and limits of use of that. So we should think about sovereignty, human sovereignty over artificial intelligence. Of course, I'm not stupid to think that we should or we can limit development of artificial intelligence, but I'm enough optimist to think about our capability to limit ourselves in using and developing systems of artificial intelligence. So I will conclude soon because I think many was told about use of artificial intelligence, our sovereignty in the field of artificial intelligence or digital space from different countries. I think we should have quite strong internationally based rules about development of artificial intelligence and use it, especially in the field of military. We should have international laws about this like we had, unfortunately we had, about development of nuclear weapons and other terrible weapons all around the world. Unfortunately, the United States left most of them now, and our future is depending on that. So let's do something that our legal minds, our legal system is not running always after technical development. Let's do to adapt our legal education and general education to understand artificial intelligence, advantages, but also dangers of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ivo. Now I turn to my colleague from the World Academy too, Mariana Buzizan, founder and managing director of AQAL Group, and a full member of the Club of Rome and a fellow of the Academy. Mariana, you are a technologist and entrepreneur. You have something important to say to us about this, I know. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm an AI pioneer. Who has seen the movie The Martian? Have you? There's a story where they flew to Mars and they lost one of their astronauts. And his name is Mark Watney, and he is a biologist. And he had to survive on Mars for 4 years until his colleagues would come back and pick him up. And I quote, "In the face of the overwhelming odds, I'm left with only one option. I'm going to have to science the shit out of this. So I invite you guys to join us in science the shit out of these problems that we're having, because I have a lot of hope and I have a lot of proof as a scientist, and I'd like to invite you to join me on this, just because be curious, and it's a lot of fun. We don't really have an opportunity because we don't have a second planet, and as a member of the Club of Rome, we are in a similar situation like Mark Watney, actually, but we're not alone like he was. We have 8 billion of us. So I'd like to continue with, with artificial intelligence, which is my major. I studied this 40 years ago, and yes, you guys have all talked about LLMs, large language models, but this is not all of AI. And yes, there is a lot of danger, and we have published an AGI constitution within capitalists, within the World Academy. But there is also large quantitative models. Who has heard about LQMs? Right. I wish more people would be in this room. What is that? This is how we apply physical and mathematical models to artificial intelligence to solve real world problems, to get out of the shit. And so this leads me to, for instance, quantum technology. It's been mentioned, but what does that mean? Quantum technology is, nature is quantum, and we are on the brink of addressing it right now. And with the application of mathematical models and physical models using AIs, we're able to address major issues like the security, quantum security. Who knows that GPS has been hijacked, it's been spoofed. There are many airlines who don't fly over certain countries because GPS is no longer secure. But with quantum algorithms and artificial intelligence, we have come up with secure communication. So blockchain, everybody talks about blockchain. In a couple of years, blockchain will be broken, but quantum security addresses that. It's available here now, and this gives me a lot of hope. So that leads me to the next topic, which is energy security. We talked for days ad infinitum about how we can provide security to the planet. And it all starts with energy security. Quantum technology provides the access to discovering new materials that will enable fusion energy. I am here in this beautiful country and I'm so empowered to have been invited here. Thank you. Thank you for having us here. Because Azerbaijan has understood how to make the transition from fossil fuels via renewable energy to fusion. We failed in the West. We've been talking about this forever. Germany is leading. Oh my God, let's build the renewable infrastructure. I have participated in it. Has the German government supported us in making it possible? No, because the political will was not possible, was not available, just like we experience it today. But technology makes it possible. Fusion technology is online, and yes, Europe is far behind the United States and China, but Europe is leading in fusion technology, which gives me, again, a lot of hope. So energy security, and we had these beautiful conversations with many ministers with whom we'll be meeting in the afternoon. Azerbaijan gets it, and they will lead us in this, and we won't do it in the West for whatever reason, but let's come back and let's support these people here. Another aspect that I'd like to address is food security, which comes back to technology again. How do we enable ourselves to feed ourselves on a planet that is turning warmer and warmer and warmer, and we have 9 planetary boundaries, and which is the operating system of the planet that supports our existence. But 7 out of these 9 have been already broken. So I don't see us going back to safe planetary boundaries within quick times. So how are we going to feed ourselves during the time of transition? And it's going to go back before it gets better. And that, again, is precision fermentation and cellular agriculture, producing proteins with technology. And yes, coming back again with artificial intelligence, one thing that everybody needs to understand, currently the mindset of our LLMs has been determined by the mindset of the people who have trained those AIs. And that is the United States, the leading edge. And of course, we talk about open systems like China. They call them open, but they're still influencing our minds, right? So this is us to jump in and have an influence on the edge with our values. And we need to take responsibility in doing that, because it's not going to happen by itself. So on one hand, you have the training systems, and now they're training themselves with recursive models and so on. But we have the opportunity at the usage opportunity, to go to the edge to influence that. So let's open up to technology, and I'm open for conversations because I'm very open. Yes, we are on the edge, but yes, the solutions to go back to safe planetary boundaries are available here now. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Mariana, for that impassioned scientific approach. Thank you. I'm going to ask Elena Mustakova, founder and president of Integralite Institute for Consciousness, Society and Wellbeing and a Fellow of the World Academy, to speak next. Elena, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you to this forum. Thank you to all the speakers so far. And thank you to my dear colleague who delivered such an impassioned, interesting, and engaging speech. She woke us all up and invited us to think in new ways. I'm going to take a little step back into history. It was in 1960 where some of the most prominent scientists who understood the power of science realized that intellectual and technological advancement was leaving far behind the advancement of human consciousness. And that is how the World Academy of Art and Science was in fact created in 1960. It was established by Nobel laureate Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein and Robert Oppenheimer and a few others for the purpose of really helping us understand this vast inner territory that we have not really spoken about here in all these days of discussing geopolitics and who and how is going to decide the new uses and applications of AI. And yet we have to remember that it really is, after all, the human mind that is creating and deciding. And for that reason as well, in 1973, NASA astronaut Edgar Mitchell came back from the moon and established the Institute of Noetic Science and Noetic Studies because he realized that as vast as the outer territories are of the world that we're trying so diligently to study through our science, equally vast is the internal territory that we have to understand. And I will make a simple proposition today, and it is that for us to finally see whether technology, these advanced and fascinating technologies, are going to dominate us, or they will be wisely used to solve all the problems that we are currently quite unable to solve, SDGs and all others, has everything to do with how much attention we give to the state of human consciousness. Now, I heard here references to human nature as a static phenomenon that has never changed, but I speak as an evolutionary psychologist and a student of the evolution of consciousness, and we have ample evidence, scientific evidence, that consciousness has evolved. And in fact, it was ever since 1930 that the most prominent scientists were beginning, quantum scientists were beginning to say, we don't just have consciousness, we are consciousness. And the nature of consciousness is to evolve. And so evolutionary psychology has described this evolutionary process and has helped us understand why it is so difficult today. Because at this time in the world, we have the coexistence of at least 7 different evolutionary systems, evolutionary worldviews with their respective values. And these different systems have to talk to each other, they have to work with each other, they have to make decisions. Which is why this conversation becomes so complicated. This is why we hear questions asked such as, why the retreat from global processes that began in 2015? Well, for one thing, it was in the year 2000 that the World Health Organization already recognized that we're in the midst of a pandemic of anxiety and depression. That was 26 years ago. So the turbulence that we talk about, or shall we say the system breakdown, can also be viewed as a very painstaking process of the evolution of our understanding of where resides true authority. So this is a panel about the tension between sovereignty and AI. And of course, sovereignty is national and AI is global. And so in this tension between national and global that we've heard people speak about, the question is, who has the authority to decide on what are the foundational principles in a digital age? Well, colleagues and friends, let's face it, the majority of humanity is no longer listening to those of us who have the opportunity to speak the most and the most frequently. The majority of humanity is asking its own questions about what is authentic authority and where do we put that authority. And these are fundamental questions of critical moral discernment, which is on the rise in the world, just as populism is. As a psychologist, I know that we always have two parallel processes pulling in opposite directions, and it is the tension between them that leads us forward. So the growth of critical moral discernment was actually seen in the pathway to the Pact of the Future. The Interim People's Pact of the Future was actually worked on by 1,600 NGOs from all over the world who had a very clear vision of what they wanted to see global governance look like. And the president of WAAS, Gary Jacobs, spoke about global social evolution and what are the deep drivers. I will suggest that the deep drivers right now are about asking the real questions about who am I, who are we really as a species, who are we, and what are our sources of authority, what are our actual sources of authentic authority. Also, who and what do we care for and relate to? Yesterday, one of the youth panelists said, where are we going to source the leaders of tomorrow when most of us have been raised to be consumers and observers? She asked a great question. And also, what is the meaning and purpose of technology in the context of human life? We get to make these decisions unless we give up. I will suggest that turbulence and breakdown, most of us here are probably likely, just looking around, have been parents. We know what turbulence and breakdown looks like in the age of adolescence, and we also know how painstaking the processes of emergent maturity are. But in the processes of emergent maturity, and this will be my closing thought, but I'd like to articulate it very clearly. So far, we've heard quite a few historical overviews of how history has been dominated by religious ideologies, by political ideologies, as it is still today, and also by scientific ideologies that denied the truth of those scientists who were speaking about consciousness for the past 100 years. That was a scientific ideology as well. So we've been dominated by ideologies, and that is very adolescent if we look at its developmental characteristics. What we're now learning to do is, and that's very painstaking, and it's not happening from today to tomorrow, but that I think is the purpose of these conversations, is how to bring into balance the three different aspects of life, human life. Those three different aspects are the social, how we organize human communities and societies, the political, how we govern and make decisions, and the spiritual, what is the essence and purpose of human consciousness and of human life. We have never had those three in balance. There's always been a balance on the side of a lot of politics. There's been a balance on the side of religious ideologies which have been fundamentally materialistic, even though they've been religious. But we have never really understood what the balance of social, political, and spiritual looks like. And as that conversation is growing, and I know that it is growing among many parts of the world, we are seeing the emergence of what my colleague Stefan said is the need for the right story, the story we haven't told yet, the story of what it means to create a multilateral system that can respond with speed, consistency, principle, and accountability. For it to be able to do that, it has to be a mature system that understands in a mature way human reality on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Very well said. Thank you. Thank you. Mila, you're going to take over
to be a
and give us our
community friend, I
insights.
only go by first name.
Mila Popovic, founding
Exactly.
director,
Thank you very
director
much.
general and director at Friendship,
Thank you very much.
Culturalism, and it's written here.
Well, I'm coming back full circle from where you started, Ketan,
Please.
which is a civilizational shift. This is what's happening here. And I would like to slightly redefine the introduction of the power play, right? To introduce a variable that could be a variable of true hope and balancing between these forces. So we are told that the AI race is primarily between China and the US, right? With the Europe basically trailing behind. If we look more carefully, what we actually see is emerging three models of technical power, and this is why I want to bring in Europe into play here with the keynote. So the US model and every single one of those have a particular frequency, if you will, right? An unusual system of knowledge generation and capacity to mobilize knowledge. So the US model has a powerful advantage not only through tech innovation, capital markets, and military capabilities, but also through something that less is often acknowledged in the context of this race, and that is its cultural influence. So American platforms, narratives, and products circulate globally and shape how people interact with technology. This cultural dimension of power has historically amplified technological leadership. Now, China, in terms of China, brings a different strength, scale, coordination, and enormous data ecosystems. These factors allow rapid development and deployment of AI systems. At the same time, the governance model raises questions internationally about openness, transparency, and the diversity of perspectives that advanced AI systems may ultimately require. And I'll explain why, what China will have to face in this way. Now, the EU model, it has often been described as the distant third, right? But in fact may hold a different kind of advantage, which is its normative power. So EU has been among the first to recognize that the AI era raises profound questions about privacy, human rights, and human agencies. And these questions just might be the breaking point for other models. Because if regulation was designed wisely, Europe could become the place where people feel that their digital lives and personal data are most protected. But not just personal data and biogenetics and everything, but the very qualia, the very subjective way we experience reality is at stake. The personhood itself and subjecthood itself is at stake. Then once that is at stake, you question what's going to happen with Chinese and American model. They might come to a very critical point. So in that sense, the future competition may not only be the technological one, we've already stated that. It may also be a competition between different visions of human security in the digital AI. I mean, true human security. Because AI increasingly shapes what we see, how we interpret info, and how we represent ourselves and others, going back to the ambassador's caricature representation and the serious, violent aftermaths of that kind of representation, which is my key claim today, that at the core of political representation is the aesthetic. And I will define that quickly. But because of the fact that AI is increasingly shaping the way we see each other, ourselves, how we interpret information, and how we are represented, the frontier of security is no longer only territorial and economic. It becomes the security of human agency and perception itself. So the core question for us, to kind of almost synthesize what we said, is the core questions of the 21st century. Who and what governs human agency in the AI era? That's the question. So with that comes the question of strategy, responsibility, policy making, infrastructure, and other things. So I will just point out something that is of a proposition of a solution. So practical advice. So given what I've said, that at the core of the political representation is the notion of the aesthetic, and others have spoken about this, anywhere from Carl Schmitt, the big historical figure, and others. But this is what I have been calling for, and I'm proposing to you, for aesthetic rights. The rights that protect the integrity of human perception, representation, and meaning-making in the AI-mediated environment. So in the AI era, the nation that succeeds, so to speak, may not simply be the nation that built the most powerful system, but may be the nation, or those, or the nations together, that build the systems people trust with their lives and their qualia and their personhood and subjecthood. So that's the preservation of their minds, their identities, and their human dignity. And the control of the narrative is at the core, as well as the drawing power of such a narrative to magnetize people's trust and subscription to it, meaning writing yourself off to the system. And you have to be careful what you're writing yourself off. So I will also recommend that, given that perception itself becomes the central question, the central governance issue, perception then itself becomes a political space in AI environment, right? So with that, I would like to just sketch something meaningful for you, because I think there is a unique opportunity to generate a global policy framework to reactivate, first and foremost, the initiative for universal declaration of human responsibilities and establish aesthetic rights as its true operative normative infrastructure. I will bring us to here and now and explain why this is the moment. Just last month, and I've spoke about this earlier, just last month, 4 giants, American giants, OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, Google, released their newest models. These models will be showing up every week, newer and newer versions. But we are at the critical point where, if the AI is truly to advance, we are dependent on human evaluation and human judgment, the RLHF, which is recursive loop of human factor, recursive learning through human factor. And this right now, this is, I mean, let's be gracious with solutions here, because I'm proposing something that could be of use to policymakers, and I'm especially appealing to my European friends as a good American. So where we are at right now is at the threshold. This is what I'm trying to tell you. This is not a conversation. This is the moment to act. This is a kairos moment in which we have to recognize that it's not only just an opportune moment, but it is the moment in which we have to accept that the will to invent is an inherent human drive that will not be stopped. And this is the point where an entire new market, labor market, is open of AI trainers and AI evaluators. Some of us who are at the back end of AI as well know what that means. That the human in the loop, that's what I wanted to say, is the key player now. We have not lost the moment. We are in it. Are you aware of that? This was in February. So I am asking you that with your usage and with your education of the very kairotic moment in which we find ourselves, not chaotic, we can actually drive this. And I will round off with, again, an invitation. Let us work on this as a policy strategist as well. This is doable. And the structure exists, especially in the Council of Europe, that is much bigger than European Union, but a possible center of moral authority in the world. I'm not favoring an organization. I have no stakes there. I'm just recognizing a mobilizer and convener of policy there. And I will round off with one more design. Not only is this the moment in which we find ourselves, but that there is an alternative of a social architecture, a counterbalance to what we and what I have called an M complex. And I'll just design that since I don't have it. It would have been easier to have a slide. But what has been driving the whole world and the base of all of our systems has been an M complex. And it is basically a mindset, a worldview, a set of values that informs and organizes militaries as the utmost force, the might, right, of a society. Then that goes and colonizes the world in order to open up new markets, then infuses them with money in order to run it through media in a full cycle loop. And it's not called the M complex for alliteration's sake only, but also because it is a matrix of might. There is a social architecture counterbalance to this that can be built in now through strong policy, through aesthetic rights, and the Universal Declaration of Human Responsibilities. We are maturing to meet our responsibilities that comes with wielding power or might.
Thank you.
Topic.